All right, what's up, everyone? Thank you guys so much for being here. This is going to be another amazing podcast recording. And my name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. And so essentially what I do here is that I need to turn the speaker off here. I record my podcast live now, which is really, really fun for me. Before, I was kind of in my office alone doing it, and we have to do a lot of editing. This way, I can speak with all you guys, and I can interact with you. I can answer questions, and it's so much fun, and it's much more engaging, lively for me. It's just more fun all around for everybody, right? You can get live teaching, you can ask me questions and engage. So thank you guys all for being here. Before I get started, I just want to go over a couple of things for anyone new to the podcast recording. Essentially, what I'll do is that I'm going to announce when I'm going to be starting the recording. Feel free to ask questions as I'm recording. This content will live on the internet, but feel free to ask questions in the chat, because what I do is I like to go back through all the questions after I'm done with the recording and answer any questions that you may have about the lesson that the podcast recording that I just did. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that I've set up 2 pages. Some of you may have heard about this. And again, I'm going to be launching a 3 to 4 month, preferably I think 3-month, 90-day group program. This is going to be the highest form of education that Jazz Piano School has to offer, because it's going to be very in-depth, very intimate, very focused, with a small group of 20 people, essentially a 90-day semester curriculum where I'm going to be interacting with those people, talking to them, video chat, listening to them perform. My team and I, Sterling and Trent, are going to work with them intimately, focus on all their goals over that 90 days, with a 1 to 3 time a week commitment, more or less, different events going on, group sessions, private sessions, guest speakers, things like that. If you're interested in just getting more details about that group that's going to be happening in a couple of months starting, go to jazzpianoschool.com/group. jazzpianoschool.com. Wow, I can't type today. /group. And you can simply put your name down on the waiting list, because again, Jazz Piano School has thousands of people that have come in and out of the doors. People are on our email list. We have hundreds and hundreds of members that have bought in Lifetime Elite Access. And again, I'm only going to be accepting 20 students because of the intimacy and focused attention. I've never given out amazing. Edie says I'm crystal clear. Perfect. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I've never given out private instruction before since I started Jazz Piano School 6 years ago. The reason for this is because I wanted to help as many people as possible. And if I was doing private lessons at the same time as I was building this business, that wasn't going to be possible. But after COVID, I kind of had an epiphany. I wanted more human connection. I wanted to interact with you all more. And I wanted to teach there and share in your wins with you, share in your success, in your progress, right? And I want to personally walk you through all the strategies, my philosophies, and teach you in this amazing group program that I'm going to be holding. So again, if you're interested at all, right, I'm going to go through the waiting list, and those people are going to have priority. I'm literally going to go down the waiting list. I'm going to have conversations with everyone to see if it's the right fit. If that person's not interested, I'm going to go to the next name on the list, right? So I foresee there being hundreds of names on this list, to be honest, and I'm only going to be taking 20 students. Go to jazzpianoschool.com/group, and you can get the details. It's not committing you to anything, but you can get the details on the 90-day group program, which will allow you to work with myself and my team of college degree educators on your jazz piano skills, all right? That's the first thing. The other cool thing that I'm excited about is that I have my live stream iPad. I stream from my iPad. I have it hooked up to a Ethernet cable now. So hopefully the stream now is great. That's what I'm hoping. So it should be really clear. You shouldn't have any really buffering issues at all. So I'm really excited about that. The other thing is that I don't think there was another thing. I think that was it. Oh, yes. If you are not a Jazz Piano School member, on these podcast recordings, we have members and non-members on here. If you're not a Jazz Piano School member, at any time during the podcast recording or during the Q&A, you can go to jazzpianoschool.com/discount. Okay, what I like to do is that if you're on here and you're not a member and you're interested in becoming a member, you can go to jazzpianoschool.com/discount and you'll receive a discounted rate for Jazz Piano School. Okay, your monthly membership will be $47, and if you want to choose Lifetime Elite, you can do that as well. That'll give you access to everything inside of Jazz Piano School for the rest of your life, essentially. So that page expires tonight. They always expire the day of, so you have, if you need to think about it, you can think about it all the way up until tonight. But again, that's going to be there for you. So I'm going to be going over blues reharms, and this is a really, really fun one for me. I love reharms. I love chords. I love movements. I love sounds. I love extensions. And playing beautiful chords is a really, really fun thing for me, even more so than improvisation. And so, yeah, this is going to be really, really awesome. So let me see here. So I'm going to start. And again, if you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat. Put them in the chat, because I'm going to go back to all the questions after I'm done recording the podcast, and I will answer literally every single one of your questions. All right. So and yes, for all the members, guys, all the members get replay access to this. Okay. So if you're a member, you get full replay access to this. No problem. You can watch it whenever you want. But again, ask questions if you need to and want to, and I will go back and I'll stay on as long as I need to answer any and all of your questions about the podcast I'm about to teach. Okay, let me grab some water right real quick before I start recording. And again, you can if you're not a member, you can re-listen to this on iTunes. This is we edit it and release it to the public. If you're a member, obviously you get more continued support on all the topics that I'm going to be going over in this particular podcast recording. All right, so here we go. Make sure I have my stuff good to go. All right, welcome to the Jazz Piano School podcast, episode number 221. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited to do today's podcast because I want to be going over blues reharm. Now, this is a really, really fun topic for me because I love chords, I love extensions, I love colors, and I love the blues. I grew up listening to Oscar Peterson, Art Tatum, all these amazing, Gene Harris, these blues players. I play in church. It's amazing. I love the blues. So if you are new to Jazz Piano School, you can go to jazzpianoschool.com to check us out. And if you want to join the live audience that I have literally right now listening to me record this live podcast that are about to ask me questions as I teach, and then I'm going to answer them afterwards, go to jazzpianoschool.com/live podcast to get on the live podcast recording list, okay? And then you too can join the live audience when I do these podcast recordings, interact with me, and ask me questions. All right, so with that being said, let's dive right into this lesson. Here we go. So there's going to be 4 different reharms I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, okay? The first one's going to be the tritone substitution. Now, I'm quickly going to explain these, but I'm not going to go too in-depth because I want to get into blues reharms. Now, a tritone substitution. Tritone substitution is where we can take any dominant chord. So let's say we have a G7 chord. Because of the shells in the G7 chord, we can substitute this chord with another chord. I call it a sibling, right? The sibling, okay? Or it's twin sibling, right? So what we can do with this G7 is because another chord, a dominant chord, I'm going to tell you what that is, a D flat 7. Because a D flat 7 shares the same 3rd and 7 as the G7, we can substitute those 2 chords. Now we can do this because the 3rd and the 7th dictate the quality of the chord, meaning they're really, really important to the harmonies. So if they share the similar harmonies, right? So here's the shells to a G7, 3, 7, right? And here are the shells to the D flat 7, 3, and 7, right? They're just flip-flop. If they share those same important harmonic notes, we can swap them, right? So in a 2-5-1, if I were to play this, what I can do now is I can swap out the G7 for a D flat dominant 7. Just like that, okay? Now the other substitution I'm going to be talking about, the other reharm tool I'm going to be using in the blues progressions, again, this is just going to be part 1, is going to be the relative 2 minor. The relative 2 minor. Now, for any dominant chord, E flat 7, B7, it also has a sibling minor chord. that can go into the dominant. So for example, a G7 chord. In a 2-5-1 that leads to G7, this sibling chord would be a D minor 7 because in a 2-5-1, right? D minor is going to lead to G7, 2, 5, 1. Okay, now if you're more advanced with theory, you'll understand what I just said, but if you still don't really understand what I was saying, what you can do to find a sibling minor 2 chord is simply move down by a fourth of the root of the dominant chord that you're on. For example, if I'm on a D flat 7, D flat's going to be the root. If I go down by a fourth, A flat minor 7 is going to be the relative 2 minor to D flat 7. Now that also makes sense because in a 2-5-1, we start the 2 chord, right? The 2 minor 7 is going to be A flat minor 7. See that? A flat minor 7, D flat 7, G flat major 7. Okay, that's the other principle. There's going to be 2 other principles I'm going to talk about, reharm tools as I like to call them in jazz piano school. And these reharm tools are going to be the sus reharm tool and the secondary dominant reharm tool. Now the sus tool is going to be as follows. Any dominant chord we can make and turn into a sus chord. Now a sus chord has a 4 in it instead of a 3. See that? Just like that. So my chord is now 1, 4, 5, 7. Okay? And then the 3. Now the sus is short for suspended, so it's like a suspended harmony that resolves to the 3. Just like that. So for example, in the blues, there's lots of dominant chords. We can take a F7 dominant chord in an F blues and we can change it to being a sus chord and then resolve it if we want. Okay? And the last one, a secondary dominant. Essentially, any minor 7 chord that leads to a dominant chord, we can also transform into a dominant. For example, a D minor 7 in a 2-5-1 in the key of C. A D minor 7 moves to G7, and then the G7 moves to C major 7. Now the dominant chords, all dominant chords, they want to move by a 5th, okay? I'm not going to get into why, all right? Just trust me. Like, they have feelings too, okay? They have emotions. They want to move and resolve down by a 5th. So if my D minor 7 can lead to G7, right? Well, simply, that means if I put a D7 here, the D7 still wants to lead to G7 too, right? Because if the D minor 7 resolves down by a 5th to G7, and I change the D minor to a D dominant, this D7 still wants to resolve by a 5th. So we really haven't changed much. All we've done is change the quality of the chord, but the purpose of the minor 7 and the dominant 7, whether it be a D minor or a D dominant, they both want to move and continue forward to a G7 chord. So even though we've changed the sound of the chord, right, from minor to dominant, they're still acting in the same manner. They still want to go to G7. So it doesn't matter if we use a minor or a dominant. So what does that mean? In a 2-5-1, instead of playing a minor for the first chord, we can play a dominant for the first chord. Right? So I can play a dominant chord here, and then I can go to another dominant chord, and I can go to another dominant chord. Okay? So let's get into the blues now. You just had to know those 4 reharms. And again, these are in jazz piano school, these are my 4 must-know reharm strategies, because when we start to combine these, I'm going to try not to, but I love it so much. I need to give some away today. But when you start to combine them, that's when you're really able to make amazing movements and reharms throughout any tune and any piece. And we're going to be spending time on the blues today. So let's get started. So our traditional blues essentially is 3 dominant chords, excuse me. 1, I'll play root position here. 1, 4, 5, 1. For the majority, I'm going to be talking about a jazz blues. So the jazz blues has some different types of chords. I'm going to get into those, but simply, I'm going to break down each line for you right now and show you the ways we can use some of the reharm tools I just discussed. Okay, so on the first line, normally in a jazz blues, it just sits on the 1 dominant chord. So we'd have this. 1, 1, 1, 1, 4. Right? So you just have the 1 chord for 4 measures. Right? Sometimes you have a 2-5 at the end, so you'd have C minor 7, going to F7, going to B flat 7. Okay? What I want to talk to you about right now is utilizing the first reharm I talked about. That's going to be the tritone substitution. So I'm going to add some more advanced voicings into my blues in just a second, but for now I'm going to keep it pretty simple for you. So if I start on this 1 chord, now a little secret for all you, a little nugget. A lot of people relate the tritone substitution to a movement in a 2-5-1, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. We can use a tritone for the chord that we're already on, right? Now, this is for any tune, not just the blues. If we want to create movement, we can use a tritone substitution for a dominant chord we are already on. What does that mean? Well, instead of just playing this dominant 7 chord, this 1 chord, let's move to its tritone to create some movement. So essentially, I haven't really done anything much here. I've used the tritone substitution, but the purpose of both these chords is the same. We still have an F7 chord, but now we're just playing a B7 chord. The shells are the same, right? But they're just flip-flopped. So they both want to get to the B flat in measure 2, right? But we're just doing it a different way. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this is line 3 of the music. And again, if you're at a computer or something like that, you can zoom in on the music if you hit Command plus on your Mac keyboard, or Control plus on a PC, I believe. And you can kind of zoom in on that music there if you want to see it more clearly. But this is line 3. We're going from F7 to B7 to B flat. So that's a way you can use the tritone. You can simply add in more movement. Now let me kind of advance the way this sounds a little bit with some more advanced voicing. So if I take an F7 here, here's my B7. Like, this sounds much different than what I just played, right? Woo-hoo-hoo. Right? How about that, huh? I love that sound so much. Now, why does that sound so different? Let's talk about that. All the Reharm tools I just explained to you are just that. They're tools, right? So we need to add musicality to them. What does that mean? We need to add texture. We need to add dynamics. We need to add color. We need to add all those different types of musicality textures, slides, things like that, to make them sound cool, different types of rolls. If you're just using the tool, it's not going to sound the way I just showed you. Right? Now I'm adding extensions into my voicing, right? So check it out. This voicing right here, I'm using essentially a normal rootless voicing here, 7, 9, 3, 13, right? So I'm going, I love this voicing, by the way, over the 1 chord in a blues. So many people do this, like new beginners and intermediates will use their rootless voicings, which is okay. That's completely fine. I mean, it's the 6th progression of learning in jazz. You'll take a rootless dominant chord, right? 3, 13, 7, 9 for your F7, and then you'll go to a rootless dominant chord for your B flat 7. But if we put the 1 on top in my F7 voicing, and I voice it like this, it has more of a center. It has more of a key center. You hear that? Like, it sounds like we're more in F rather than, this is more because we have this G on top. We have an extension outside. So I love this voicing here. Again, I have 1 and 7 here. Excuse me. 3, 13, 1. This creates more of a key, a tonal key center to the key of F. And then I'm going to this. I can choose to add the 3 here, or I can use a drop 2. And this is a left-hand voicing setup for all my JPS members, right? This is going to be 1 and 3 setup, or 1 and 10, right? As Bruce, one of our members, just learned. And I can't reach this, barely, so I have to roll this, right? Again, you can have the 13 on top here, or you can have the 5 on top, which I like as well, because it keeps the tonality of the F in your key. Okay, excuse me. So that's the use of the tritone reharm. And again, I changed some of the extensions. You don't have to use these extensions here. You can use sharp 9, sharp 11. Right? What else did I use? You can use flat 13, flat 9. If you want. You can use natural 9, sharp 11. I love this one too. Right, so I have 1 and 3 here, 7, natural 9, sharp 11. I love this. get into all that in a second, but that's going to be your tritone. Okay, now there's lots of different ways we can use the tritone, right? So once we get to a B flat 7, to get back to our F7, so now just sticking with the same exact principle, okay, where we're on a chord and we want to create movement from our chord, right? What's a tritone of a B flat 7? E7. Right? So if we want to move to an E7 chord, we could do that. All we're doing is we're taking the dominant chord we are already on. This is such an amazing principle, an amazing concept for you to learn because it can create movement where there's no movement. If you're sitting on one chord for a while, like a dominant B flat 7, and you want to create some harmonic movement, just play the tritone. Right? So I can go from a B flat 7 to an E7, and then go back to my F7. Now again, I've moved back to measure 3. So I created movement with the chord in my second measure, the B flat 7, the 4 chord, right? Now I'm putting an altered sound. Remember, on any of the dominant chords that you play in a blues, you can change the colors of them. You can change the alterations to reflect any colors you want. It doesn't have to be just natural 9 and natural 13. You can have any colors you want. I had flat 13 and sharp 9 over my tritone. And again, yes, we can apply colors to our tritone sub over my E7 tritone. And then I move back into my F7, okay? Let's keep moving down into the 4th measure of our blues, which is usually in a jazz blues, it's a turnaround to get us back to the 4. So usually we have a 2, 5, C minor 7, right, to F7. Which brings us back to the 4. Okay, this is going to be measure 5 of the blues, right? The 4 chord. So what we can do here, essentially, is we can use another tritone sub. Right? So just by adding that tritone sub there, we're adding more colors. I can do, you know, different types of colors. I can use all sorts of colors over that one reharm. I mean, just with the use of one reharm, you can get thousands of colors. All right, so here's the first 4 measures of the blues with small reharms added. 1, tritone of 1 with natural 9, natural 13. 4 chord. Okay, tritone of 4 chord. Back to 1. Okay, now I can use essentially, well, I don't want to talk about that just yet. I'll get to that in a second. Okay, moving into the 2-5. Tritone of the F7, right, with an altered extension, sharp 9 and flat 13. Okay, now I'm on the 4 chord, right? So I'm going to stay there for now, but let's add some of the other tools into this a little bit to show you how you can use them. All right, so what we can do here is the other tools. So I've utilized essentially a tritone now, and I haven't really utilized any of the other reharm tools I talked about, the relative 2 minor, the sus, and the secondary dominant. So let's use some of those tools, all right? Let's use the sus. That's really, really easy to start to use. Remember, our general rule of thumb for our reharm tool, our sus reharm tool, is we can take any dominant chord and make it a sus. So instead of this, I would have this, and then to this, or this, and then into this. Right, so I'd make my first chord a sus. So I'm going from 4 to 3, 4 to 3. Right, so if I just take literally almost a root position chord here in my right hand, I'm going sus to the 1, the dominant. Sus to the 1. Now listen to how it sounds all within the first measure. I'm going to use the sus and the tritone. Sus, dominant, tritone, 4 chord. That was within the first measure. Like, it's such a gorgeous sound. Right? So pretty. I love it so much, right? So now take a notice, because I'm going to talk to you about this in a second. This essentially is a C minor 7 chord with an F in the bass. it has the same purpose, like it's creating a sus chord, but essentially look at this. This is just a C minor 7 with an F in the bass, which resolves. So technically, we could swap out the bass note and just play C minor to F7. Now, what tool is that? That's the relative 2 minor reharm. So what we're doing is before the F7, we're putting the F7 sibling minor chord before the F7. We're playing the minor chord before the F7. C minor to F7. I love this. Right? So this is going to be on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for all the live audience. Well, I guess anyone watching. System 7. We're starting with a C minor, and then essentially we're moving to an F7, and then we're adding the tritone of F7, the B7, into the B flat. I love this. I love this so much. Like, this is such a gorgeous sound. Right? I'm gonna spread my voicing out a little bit, add some more extensions. Listen to how powerful that is, right? The C minor, starting on the C minor, and I'll use this more, but again, you need to know this is the relative 2 minor. Again, if any of the live audience has questions, go ahead and throw them in now. I'll ask them after the recording's over. So we're using the C minor 7 to get to our F7, and then we're adding the tritone, and then going to B flat. Now we could add the B flat, the 4 chord, we could make it a sus, right? If we wanted to, let's make it a sus. Now listen to that. Right, that's a completely different sound. Like just using these basic reharm tools. Right, so now we have a B flat sus. This is a 4 sus chord. I can start from the C minor, F7, B7, tritone, B flat 7 sus, right? But check it out. What if I wanted to go relative 2 minor to the B flat? What would that be? That would be my F7, F minor 7 to my B flat. Okay, you starting to see what's happening here? Again, this is only part 1, so I don't want to go too advanced because I am going to film a part 2. So my F minor is my relative 2 minor. It's the sibling relative minor to the B flat dominant 7 chord in the second measure of a blues, right? If you do decide to add a 4 chord in the second measure of your blues, normally that 4 chord's not there, but it can be added, right? So what our progression would look like would be C minor, F7, tritone of F7 with 2 extensions, the 9 and the 13, right? But now instead of going to the 4 chord, we're going to go to the relative minor chord first, which is F minor, and then to our 4 chord, and then we can go to the tritone of that, and then back to our 1. So check it out, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, tritone, F minor, right? And then we're back to measure 3 now, just on our 1 chord. Okay, so you're starting to see how the rabbit hole can get really, really deep when we start to combine these. Okay, let me keep going. I'm going to move a little bit more quicker because I want to get to some of the other parts of the blues. So let's go from the turnaround. Here's my C minor 7 tritone. Okay, now we're on measure 5 of the blues, the B flat. Okay, I'm going to switch pages here for everybody. And we're going to be in the variations for measures 5 to 8 now. Okay, so we're on the 4 chord. Now remember our 4 chord, right? We got there with an F7 because an F dominant 7, it wants to resolve down by a 5th to the B flat. So what we can do is simply pivot. Like let's go back to the F7, maybe to bring us back to the B flat 7. So I'm on B flat 7 here. I can go F7, B flat. Now that kind of sounds weird, right? Because you're just kind of pivoting back. But what if we use the tritone? We can go B flat 7, B7. There's our pivot. Right? And so essentially this pivot here brings us back to the B flat 7. Now again, we can use sus chords if we want. Right? I love my sus there. I love my sus on that 4 chord. Okay, I could also use sus for my tritone sub. This is just a regular dominant B7 chord. Remember, this is a B7 tritone sub for F7. So I have natural 9, natural 13 here. Let's make this a sus. So now I have 4 in the mix, not 3 anymore. Remember, your sus is with your 4, not your 3. So I could go sus, sus, sus. All I'm doing to create some depth and warmth to my voicing is putting octaves in my left hand, by the way. Just like that, right? Okay, let's move forward. We're going to go to measure 5, 6, 7 now. We're back to the 1 chord. And again, any of the same principles I just talked to you about, there's so many more things you can do still with those 2 measures, measures 5 and 6, but I'm going to keep going right now, okay? Okay, so now the turnaround in a jazz blues is usually kind of like a minor 2-5, or sometimes people will do regular 2-5 to the 2 minor, right? And then 5, and then back to the 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, right? 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. So let's talk about the 3, 6. Let's talk about the turnaround to the 2 chord, because this is where it starts to get really, really fun, really cool because of these movements in the blues. So again, in a normal traditional blues, you just have 1, 4, 5, 1. In a jazz blues, usually we have these kind of 2-5 turnarounds, which makes it a jazz blues, like a jazz. That's what makes a jazz blues. We have the 2, the 3, going to a 6 dominant, and then going to a 2, 5, 1. We have 2 5s, right? Minor, dominant, 1. Okay? So with our 3 right here, let's apply the secondary dominant reharm tool. We haven't used that. This 3 chord, this A minor chord, right, is the 3 minor of F7. It's leading us to a D7 dominant. So what does that mean? Well, we can make this a dominant chord, and it will still lead us to the D7 dominant chord. Okay, just like that. So let me tell you something really, really important. Listen closely. The reason the secondary dominant is so crucial to reharm is that a minor chord does not have that much ability to be reharmed, meaning there's not as many extensions. We can't apply as many reharm tools to a minor chord, right? So a minor chord does not allow for as many opportunities. But when we change this A minor 7, this 3 minor 7 to a dominant, we can do so many things to it. We have 3 other tools we can now use over this dominant chord. We can use a sus over this dominant chord. We can use a tritone over this dominant chord. We can use a relative 2 reharm tool over this dominant chord. Does that make sense? Hopefully you're seeing the importance of this, because when we change minor chords to dominant chords, it affects so many things, right? So now check it out. Instead of having a 3 minor, if I change this and I apply a secondary dominant reharm tool, right? So now I have an A7 chord. I can make this A7 a sus, right? I can play a tritone of A7. I can play the relative 2 minor to A7, which would be E minor 7. And then move to my D7. And then move to my G7. Or G minor rather. And then C7 and then F7. We have 3 more tools we can start to apply once we've created and used the secondary dominant tool to turn this minor to a dominant. Okay, let's check it out further. Let's make all of the minor chords dominant. So now we have a progression of A7, D7, G7, right? Usually the 2 chord in a blues is a minor. Let's make it a G7 chord. And again, the reason we can do this is because we're applying the secondary dominant reharm tool. This G7 still leading us to C7, so it doesn't matter. So now we have a string of 4 dominant chords: A7, D7, G7, C7, and we're finally back to the 1 chord of a blues, right? So what can we do? Let's make all the dominant chords sus chords. So now our turnaround would be this: A sus, D sus, G sus, C sus, back to our 1. Okay, so from measure 5, our blues would sound like this. Here's the starting on the 4 chord. Tritone. Tritone. 4 chord. 1 chord. Here comes our turnaround. sus, sorry, sus, sus. Okay, so you see the power of that, but let's go a step further, right? Now we have these 4 dominant chords that are bringing us back to our 1 chord. So essentially, we're in the last 4 measures of the blues. We're getting to the last 4 measures, which is the 2 chord, going to the 5 chord, right? Coming back to the 1 chord. So we have A7. I'm just playing shells in my right hand now. D7, shells, shells. So now we have 4 dominant chords. Let's stick with the A7 sus. Okay, I'm playing an A7 sus here, and you can see how I'm voicing it. 7, 1, 9, 4, and 13. Okay? I could also play an A7 altered here, but I'm choosing to apply the sus reharm. I could also apply both. So I could go sus, altered real quick. Right? So that was like that was 2 beat, that was 1 beat each, right? 1 and 2 and. So sus, altered, sus. Okay, I'm gonna get to that in a second. But yes, we could make this just altered. We can make all the dominant chords altered. Now that we have 4 dominant chords, we can make them all altered. Altered, altered, altered. Right, here's my 2 chord. Altered. 1. Okay? But let's use the tritone now. We haven't used the tritone yet on any of these 4 dominant chords. So we have A7 sus. Instead of going to D7, let's use the tritone of D7, right? So instead of going to D7 here, let's use the tritone of D7. Let's go to A flat 7. I love this. I love this sound. That's what screwed me up before, is because I wanted to go here and I was like, oh, I had to withhold. I was like, I can't do that yet, right? So I can do this. And then I can go this. Listen to that sound. From the sus to the tritone, regular, natural 9, natural 13. And then finally, we're at our 2 chord. Now again, just that turnaround. I'm taking the turnaround, moving into measure 9, just to be really clear. Okay, so here's from measure 5, the 4 chord. Okay, now listen for the turnaround I just played. So this is from measure 5 of the blues, the 4 chord. 4, tritone pivot, 4, 1. Here comes our turnaround. Sus, tritone, and now we're at our 2 chord, right? We have a G7. So what can we do with this G7 now, right? Let's make the G7 a sus first. Because now we have 4 beats with this chord. Before, in our turnaround, we only had 2 beats each. The A7 to the D7 was 2 beats each. So we didn't get to do that much. I mean, we did a lot already, but we didn't get to do that much. So with our G7 chord on our 2 chord, this is a secondary dominant we've applied now, right? Instead of a minor, we've made this dominant. Now, why do we do that? To give it more options for reharm. Okay, so now when I can do this, I can make this an altered if I want. I can make this a sus if I want. And then resolve to my altered. When you make a dominant chord a sus, folks, listen up really closely. You can resolve that sus to any type of dominant chord with extensions as you please. Do you hear what I'm saying? So like your sus chord can resolve to any type of dominant chord. It can be a flat 9 sharp 11. I could resolve this sus to a flat 9 sharp 11. That's gorgeous. I don't do that much. I just played that. That's really gorgeous. And then finally to our 5. I could resolve this to an altered chord, right? I could resolve this to a flat 9 natural 13 chord. It does not matter. That's why the sus is so beautiful, is that it's giving you a suspended 4 to resolve into any type of color you want. So I'm going to go sus to my sharp 11, flat 9. I love this chord. This is so gorgeous. Like, listen to this chord. 1, 7, flat 9, 3, sharp 11, 13. You can roll it up. This is the 2 chord of a blues. Now, it's really hard to believe that when you're playing a blues or comping, I haven't gotten into improv yet. I probably won't in this. I'm going to get into the part 2. To go from a 2 minor chord, right, to something like this. Like that is a long distance we've come with a reharm techniques, right? But in a simple, structured, organized manner, which is what I'm all about in jazz education, right? Because that's what I never had. So all we did was we applied a secondary dominant reharm tool to our 2 minor. We made it a G7. Now we applied a sus reharm tool. We made it a sus, and we simply resolved the sus to a dominant chord with 2 extensions, flat 9 and sharp 13. 3. Flat 9, sharp 11, and natural 13. Okay, here it is. From the 4 chord, measure 5 of the blues. So I chose to delay that resolution. Or I could do every 2 beats. I could do the same thing over the 5 chord. So sus, flat 9, sharp 11, natural 13, and then I could go C7 sus, and then the same exact chord. Flat 9, sharp 11, natural 13. Right? Now, this may be really, really advanced for a lot of you. That's okay. I just want you to understand the principles of what's happening here, because you can work on your extensions, right? You can work on understanding where the extensions are, but like if you understand the core concepts of this, which are really, really easy, then you can do so much and you'll have that for later. Okay, let's wrap this up. Let's get into the turnaround. So usually the turnaround in a blues is 1, 1, 6. I'm thinking ahead of myself now. 6, 2, 5, 1. So F7, and sometimes the turnaround is D minor, but let's make it a dominant, right? Let's apply our secondary reharm tool. And usually the turnaround, again, the 2 is usually minor, going to dominant. Let's make another 4 dominant chords. Okay, let's make another string of 4 dominant chords. So we're going to go F7, D7, G7, C7. Now again, we have opportunities to reharm all of these. I can go F7, I can use the tritone of D7. I can use the tritone of G7 now. I'm sure you guys have heard this progression before. And then the tritone of C7. I can use all tritones. That's gorgeous. I need to use that more too. That's like an amazing, amazing progression right there. You could vamp over, like as an ending to the blues. Anyway, back to the reharms, okay? I had to get that out of my system. I was like, wow, that progression is gorgeous. I don't know why I don't play that enough. So we could go 3, right? So instead of the 1, 2, we can use the 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 to turn around again. So simply, we can just repeat the 3, 6, 2, 5 twice in a row to end the blues, right? So from the 4 chord, 4, 4. Here's our turnaround. 2, tritone, 2, 5. Now instead of going to the 1 here, I can go to my 3 altered maybe. Tritone, right? 2 dominant, tritone of C7, and then 1. Or I could go sus, 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 or I could put relative 2s before all of those. I could go relative 2, E minor 7, A7. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking this progression here, A7, tritone of D7, G7, tritone of C7, and I'm putting relative 2 minor reharms before all of those dominant chords. So I'm going 2 minor, dominant, to our A7. 2 minor, dominant to my A flat 7. I'm just playing shells in my right hand. 2 minor, dominant. 2 minor, excuse me, dominant. Now that's something you definitely don't hear a lot. Love that. That's gorgeous. Now that 2 minor reharm tool is an amazing way to create bebop 2/5s, right? Bebop 2/5. So I'm going E minor to A7, right? So I'm basically creating bebop language with my 2/5s over the turnaround, okay? All right, so I'm going to wrap this up here, and then I'm going to take questions for all the live audience here. But essentially, in a nutshell, we have 4 different types of reharms we can use to reharm the blues, right? We have our tritone, and remember, over any tritone sub, add different types of extensions and colors. Okay? We can go tritone. We also have our sus reharm. Sus, excuse me, sus, right? Sus over the tritone of B flat 7. We also have our relative 2 minor we can reharm as well. So I can go 2 minor, F7, tritone, B flat 7 if I want, or I can put a relative 2 minor there. Right? Let me check that. Let's check that again. Relative 2, 1, tritone, relative 2, 4 chord, tritone. I could also use the relative 2 here. Now here's a turnaround to the 4 chord. Relative 2, tritone, so F sharp minor 7, tritone 4. Right? I can go 3 or altered, tritone, 2. I could go sus, flat 9, sharp 11, natural 13. I could go tritone here, G flat 7. You know, add some new extensions, or I could go sus. So I could go 2, flat 9, sharp 11, 13, sus, right? And then finally into the 1, my turnaround. So again, let me comp through a whole blues, and you can hear some of these harmonies in use. That's the diminished. So on and so forth, okay? And again, that was very, very overly demonstrated, right? I normally probably wouldn't add that many reharms into a blues, depending upon the situation with the soloist. But again, 4 different types of reharms: your tritone, your sus, your relative 2, and your secondary dominant. Add extensions to your tritone reharm and add your sus, and then you can resolve to your tritone with extensions. You have so many different possibilities with these 4 reharms in the blues. Again, thank you guys so much for watching this podcast on blues reharm. I'm going to be doing part 2. I'm going to go more in depth to some other reharms coming up soon, later this week or next week. Be sure to go to jazzpianoschool.com to check out all the amazing information and education we have there. If you want to get notifications about being in the live audience, go to jazzpianoschool.com/live podcast, and you can sign up there to interact with me because I'm about to go answer questions for the live audience. Thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you have a fantastic day, and as always, happy practicing. All right, we are done. I'd like to have a a mic here where I didn't have to talk into this because it kind of cranks my neck. I'm trying to look over, but this mic is so amazing. It sounds so great. Okay, everyone, I'm going to take questions now. And I saw some questions before. And essentially, I'll answer those if you guys have. I didn't see too many questions coming in about this, but let me answer some questions right now. Again, if you guys are new to Jazz Piano School or you've never seen Jazz Piano School before, go check out the link there and you can get a discount to sign up to get more information about all of the education I'm teaching here. Obviously, our 600 plus Success Path curriculum, our lab, and our specialty courses. But Susanna asked, is that A7 altered when it's converted from A minor to A7? Susanna, you can use an A7 altered if you want. So when you convert, I probably answered this in the podcast, but when you convert a minor chord, right, your A minor 7 to a dominant, you can now make any dominant chord altered. It doesn't have to be altered, though. Like, an altered is just simply a shorthand way of saying sharp 9, flat 13. So, for example, in the 2 chord of my blues, my F7 blues, instead of having a G minor 7, I can convert this using a secondary dominant tool, Reharm. I can make it G7. Now I can make my voicing altered. So now I have a G7 altered in place of the minor 2. That's my Reharm. So here's the turnaround. 1, 4, 3, 6, altered. Right, to my 5 sus maybe. And then for my turnaround again, A7, D7, G7, C7, I could go all altered. I can also use altered chords over my entire blues. The 1 chord could be altered, the F7 1, right? Right, and then I can literally use altered over, I mean, it wouldn't sound great over my entire blues. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that, but again, you know, you can. Any dominant chord can be changed to an altered chord, all right? Does anyone have any more questions? I don't see many more questions coming in. If you have questions, you want me to revisit any of the things that I've taught, please let me know. All right, and I'll be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll probably end this when everyone's done with questions. Okay, let me just scroll up here, see if anyone. But again, you know, there's so many different ways to use these tools in the blues, especially because there's so many dominant chords, right? There's so many different dominant chords. So in the blues, obviously there's so many ways you can use this. These are some of my favorites, right? And utilizing some of the reharms here in this book, like that turnaround where you have 1, you know, the 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. There's so many different ways you can do that. Like I said, you could use tritones for all of them. You could use tritone for A7, right, to D7, then tritone for the 2 chord, and then maybe go to the 5. So your progression would be E flat 7, D7, D flat 7, C7. I love this one. This is really, really nice. Okay? This is so awesome. So here's my 4 chord. Here's my turnaround. So now I'm going E flat 7 to D7 altered, D flat 7 instead of the 2 chord, I have G7 to C sus, right? Playing a sus reharm tool. So here's the turnaround. D flat 7, C7. All right, so from the beginning or from the 4 chord. Go sus. Sorry, I like adding my 3rd there on top of my sus chord. Love that sound. You can go sus to dominant, sus to dominant. Johnny says, great lesson. I guess it's no coincidence you're stepping the melody in 1/2 steps in the last example you played. Right, exactly. I mean, with the theoretical process, the half, it starts creating these melodies by half steps. But it isn't a coincidence, because when you start to, you can apply these strategies to create these melodic lines. It's really, really cool, right? So if I were to play a tritone of the three, right, the A7. So there's a lot of steps that go into it that, right, people don't realize. This is why I love structured education. I love teaching about tools instead of just showing you guys, I could print out music for my voicings and you'd be like, oh, cool, this sounds great, but I don't really know how he's getting this, right? But now you do. So we're going from a 3 minor. We're taking the regular jazz. We're turning this into a dominant from using our secondary dominant reharm tool. We're taking a tritone of A7, turning that into E flat 7. And then we're going down to the normal 6 chord, the D7, but now we're taking a tritone of our 2 minor, right? We're making a secondary dominant G7, we're turning that into a D flat 7, and then going down to our C7, but I'm making it a sus first. And then I'm going to C7. So now we have this beautiful progression that's 1, right? 3, tritone of the 3. You could even slip in the E7 here, right? Because guess what? The E7 is a tritone of the B flat 7. And the B flat 7 is a secondary dominant to E flat 7. It wants to go to E flat 7. This is ways you can take this even further. So I could go 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a common walk down. You hear it called as a walk down, but why does it work? It works because the E7 is a tritone of the B flat 7 that wants to go to E flat 7. The E flat 7 is a tritone of the A7, and the D7 is a regular 6 chord. Funny, right? So anytime you have a 1, 4, 3, 6 progression, I used to hear bass players start walking down, and I would never know why they were doing the walk down. Eventually I caught on, but I didn't know why. I was just like, oh, they're playing a walk down instead of a 1, 4, 3, 6. They're going 1, E7, E flat, D7. But again, we can go a step further, go to the tritone of G, which creates a full walk down. All right, so A7 is A dominant 7. Yes, A7, Susanna, is A dominant 7. It's a shorthand terminology, right? Anytime you say A7, that means A dominant 7. They're the same thing. And so what we do with our A7, our A dominant 7, right, is we take that and we create an altered voicing out of our A dominant 7 chord. Our A7 chord, we'd create an altered voicing from any type of dominant chord. Cool. Joan, so great to hear. Bruce, ways to practice. So what you guys want to do to practice this is isolate each reharm tool. You need to be very, very comfortable and fluent with each tool that I'm talking about in order to accomplish the things that I'm showing you here quickly, right? And your goal is to be able to apply this in different types of ways, in all sorts of ways, in tunes. I could go. So I just reharmed Stella on the spot, based on the tritones. I could also use some sus chords over my tritones, right? I can use the tritone of A7 here. I can go to E flat sus. Excuse me. Tritone, sus, right? I could go to sus, B flat sus, A7 sus. I could do all sorts of things, right? But it's because I've taken the time, right? I've taken my building blocks, my tools, my reharm tools, and I've worked them, ad nauseum by themselves. I've isolated each tool. That way I can take that tool and I can add it to my tool bag, right? So now when I encounter my blueprints, which are our tunes, right? We can start to I can use my tools in my tool bag whenever I want, over any tune, however I want. I have complete freedom over my tool. So Bruce, you want to isolate each tool. Take a tool that caught your ear today, right? Well, which one? The sus? Did you like the sus reharm? Did you like the tritone reharm? Did you like the relative 2 reharm? Did you like the secondary dominant reharm? Now, the secondary dominant reharm doesn't require that much work. It's just mental work. Like, when can I transform a minor chord into a dominant? As long as it's going to the next dominant chord. Like, for example, if you have a 2-5 progression, like 3 minor going to a dominant, I can make that minor a dominant chord. Now I can apply more reharm tools to that dominant chord. Okay, so take one of the, obviously, for all the Jazz Piano School members here, go to these reharm tools. They're located in the Success Path curriculum, and isolate, stage 3, I believe, isolate each reharm tool that you want to practice. Just practice your tritone reharm tool, okay? Just practice your sus reharm tool, right? And isolate that and start to really work on that tool in a lot of different ways. Obviously, theoretically, you want to know it. Technically, you want to be able to play it. In improvisation, you want to be able to use it in different types of situations. And then finally, your last step always is to integrate it into tunes. Now, at that point, that should be the easiest part. That should be the easiest part because you've worked on your tool. You know how to use it. And now when you take it out of your tool bag to use it over tunes, all you got to do is just use it, right? Easier said than done, I know, but with the structured education I provide, right, that should be part of it. Let me see here. Trevor Clark, 2 related questions. I noticed after practicing rootless voicing, I can recognize them by hearing. Does this happen naturally with most chord reharm, including these altered and other? Trevor, yes, absolutely. Like, absolutely. So I can hear the reharms pretty easily after spending time with each reharm tool, right? So I spent lots and lots of time just reharming dominant chords to make them sus. So if I played a blues with all sus chords, I just spent time with sus, and then as you're playing them, as you're listening to yourself playing them and reharmony, your ear will develop a relationship with that sus sound. So you'll know exactly what it sounds like, and you'll start to learn when you want to use it. Like, when do you want to use that texture? When do you want to hear that texture? Because it's just a color, right? It's a color. Just like our rootless voicings, it's a color you can use. Additionally, would you recommend placing emphasis on ear training and recognizing these chords, or will it just happen? Yeah, I just answered that question. That'll just happen naturally. You want to train your ear to hear the sounds by playing them. Okay, the more you play them and listen, right? Listen to the harmonies it's creating, your ear is naturally gonna build a relationship with it. And it's like a baby learning the language for the first time. They're listening to their parents all the time, right? And they're hearing it, and then they start to speak. You start to speak, and then as they speak, they're hearing themselves speak, and they're tweaking things at the same time. Like their words are trying to come out, but they're not correct. But then they're listening more, and at the same time, they're speaking, and everything starts coming together all at once. But if they don't start trying to talk, and they just listen, that's a problem, right? It's going to be really hard for them to speak the language. Johnny says, are walk downs a good way to practice this? Use the discipline of creating the next chord in the nearest position available. Yeah, people call it walk downs, but I think it's more important to understand why the walk downs are happening, right? Why they're available. So, you can't always use walk downs. Like, walk downs are available in certain positions, right? Based off of the tools I've taught you. So we are able to walk down based off of the theory, because I'm using a secondary dominant tritone here. I'm using a tritone of the 3 now and the regular 6. So I wouldn't necessarily practice walk downs. I'd practice understanding the 4 tools I'm trying to teach you today, because that will give you access to so many more things, so many more doors, opportunities in your language. Now, I haven't even got into improvisation yet, right? We can improvise. can improvise over all of the different reharms I'm creating, right? Whether it's the 2/5s, you know, if I'm doing my 2/5s, you know, I can improvise over every single reharm that I'm now applying to the blues or any tune. And if I just practice walk downs, I wouldn't be opening up that door, right? So you want to practice the tools, the reharm tool, the tritone, relative to the sus or the secondary dominance. Spend time with each one of those, and that's going to allow you to create walk downs, but it's also going to allow you to create so much more. Bruce says, sticking with the main curriculum success path, no problem. Bruce, yes. I mean, again, if you want to jump to this, Bruce, you're going to skip a lot of stuff. But like, if this is what you want to add into your playing right now at the time that you're at in your journey, go for it, you know? But, you know, always, you know, like I mentioned, the success path in jazz piano school is our main curriculum. You want to think about that as the highway, okay? But like, obviously, when you're driving on a road trip from California to Boston, right, on a highway, you're going to get you know, bored, or you need food, or you got to go to the bathroom. You got to take rest stops, right? Because you can't just stay on the highway the whole time. You got to take breaks. The main curriculum is like your highway. Now, you're going to need breaks, Bruce, right? If you want to take a break, maybe you see a billboard that says the world's biggest ball of yarn. Get off the highway, right? Go check out the ball of yarn. You know, have some fun. You don't need to stay on the highway the entire time. Like, the highway is going to get you from point A to point B, but along the way, you want to have some fun as well, right? So go see the biggest ball of yarn. So like, go check out these reharms, you know, in the lab under mini courses of 4 must know reharm tools, or in the success path. You jump ahead to stage 3, check out these reharms, but make sure you get back on the highway. Make sure you go back to where you are, because that's what you need. If you're pulling off the highway and you're swerving all in and out, you know, going to all these random places, guess what? You're going to get lost if you don't get back on the highway, right? And you're going to develop as a pianist without holes. All right. Shell says, is there a lesson on reharms in your JPS tools section? In the main course curriculum, success path, the reharms, guys, and you can type in your search bar. For all the members out there, type in your search bar. Thanks, Paul. So glad you guys were here. Type in the search bar, reharms. You'll find all the reharms, but I believe 0, 1, 2, I believe they start in stage 3 of the main course curriculum success path, the reharms, because there's a lot of info, like the voicings I'm using here. These are 2-hand voicing, comping voicings that I teach you even before you get to this point. Because if you don't have the voicing structure to play these reharms, they're going to sound like this. Or they'll sound just like you would play them with rootless voicings, which is okay. Right? So up until, you know, you get to reharms, essentially, like, I'm showing you a lot of information to make them sound exactly the way that to make them sound like this. With some drop 2s, right? Maybe some rolls. All the ways I'm voicing these so they sound so great, that's going to be before the reharms in the main course curriculum success path. But if you want to skip their Shell or Bruce, yes, skip to stage 3, I believe, again. And you can start there with the reharms, or in the lab, there's a mini course called the 4 Must Know Reharms. That's a great course as well. They're in both places, and there's great information in both places of Jazz Piano School, okay? Joe says, what app do you use that shows the exact name of the chord that you're playing? I notice it displays on your right screen now as you're playing. That app is called Mediculous. Like ridiculous, but mediculous. MIDI, because it's a MIDI. So like my keyboard's plugged into the app. My rig here is really expansive, so it's plugged into my laptop, which I'm streaming, which shows all the chords. Sorry, Ray, I skipped over you. Can you find a way to rearrange your layout so more of the keyboard shows up when you see? Yes. Wow, I didn't even realize that a lot. What I'm doing here is mostly octaves in my left hand. Like, you guys should be able to see this, but essentially when I'm jumping down here to the bottom end, if I, whoops. If I zoom out here, the only thing my left hand's doing to create these voicings, and for all the Jazz Piano School members, this is going to be the two-hand voicing building system, or any two-hand voicing setup in the main course curriculum that's allowing me to create these beautiful voicings. A lot of it is with your left hand. So I'm playing a number of different things: 1 and 7, 1 and 3, or 1 and 10, 1 and 10 here, or 1 and 3. Right? So 1 and 7, 1 and 3, 1 and 3. So my left hand is mainly the reason they sound so rich is because my pinky bass notes are down here in this nice low end. And even this voicing right here is just a bass note with a chord in my right hand. But a lot of times, like the majority of students don't venture down into this low area of the piano to play bass notes, which is why a lot of them are missing out on that really, really lush, rich, resonant voicing. Like I even play the lowest note on the piano, this A, right? So yeah, so that's going to be my left hand there for my voicings. 1 and 7, 1 and 3, and 1 and 10. Bruce says, I'm aware of all these reharms, understand theory and use from time to time, but started with stage 0, now halfway through stage 1. I want to be thorough, so I look ahead, but don't skip around. Bruce, that's okay. Sometimes you got to eat the ice cream. I know you're very, very disciplined, which is great. But again, like if you're on the highway, you got to take a bathroom break sometimes. You got to go get some food, right? So Bruce, if you want to go get some food, go get a snack. You can get off the highway, the main course curriculum success path, right? Go to the lab maybe, or just look around, right? Grab a bite to eat and then just go back to where you are on that highway. Get back on the highway and then keep cruising, with a little bit of knowledge, a little snack, some food in your belly, right? You went to the bathroom, you're feeling good. You got to have a new fresh start, a new mindset, new perspective on things. Sometimes it's good to take a break. All right. So I think I'm going to wrap up here, guys. So again, if there are any non-members, go to jazzpianoschool.com/discount. You can get access to all the practice materials, all the lesson texts, all the workbook exercises for all the reharms I talked about. Obviously, so much more. We have three main areas in Jazz Piano School: the Success Path curriculum, the lab and specialty courses. And, there's monthly membership and lifetime membership. And then occasionally we offer the specialty courses as well as side add-ons. Okay. And again, if you guys want to go to be a part of the group, I'll take this link off here for now. If you want to be a part of the group, go to jazzpianoschool.com/group and you can sign up for the waiting list on that. And put your name down. And again, I'm kind of aiming for, I'm still figuring out a lot of different details. But I'm aiming for probably April, the spring. And again, this is going to be in person with myself and my team, meaning not just chat, but, video chat. Like the platforms will be on Zoom. I'm going to expand. I have the capabilities to add video chat into this live stream right now so I can speak with you guys personally, watch you play, talk to you. My team will be able to do that as well. Sterling and Trent, you'll get private lessons, group lessons, guest education, obviously for new people, all the information, access to Jazz Piano School. So it's going to be really, really fun. It's going to be awesome. And again, we're only going to accept 20 people. So I think that's it, everyone. I'm going to be doing part 2 next week, recording part 2 next week probably. And I'm going to have some free trainings for all the new people that are kind of unfamiliar with jazz piano school. Maybe you just entered jazz piano school, the world of jazz piano school, and myself as a person, right? I'm going to do some trainings on the JPS system, the education system that I created and that I teach to all of the JPS members, and essentially my philosophies as how I lay out my lessons here that are a lot different than any other online jazz piano website education you're going to find. My philosophies are very structured and organized and very detailed and specific because I never got that type of education from my teachers, and I always wanted to provide it for my students. So, hope you guys have a fantastic day. It's almost lunchtime where I am in California. I'm going to go get some food. I'm going to get off the highway. I'm going to get a bite to eat, and then I will get back on the highway. So that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I got a nifty little sign here. I'll talk to you guys later. Happy practicing.